My name is Roger Fernandes. I'm a Native American artist and storyteller and educator, and I belong to the Lower Elwha Band of Clallam Indians, or Nuxcleum. Nuxcleum is a tribal name that we have for ourselves. Clallam is the English pronunciation of Nuxcleum. It means strong people. And I'm also Makah. My great-grandmother was married into the Makah tribe as a young woman, and so we also were related to the Makah people. I've been asked to talk about storytelling today, and that's a very complex issue, which is also very simple. So I'd like to approach it from the simple angle first. Storytelling is one of the most basic ways we human beings have of communicating and sharing and learning and teaching. If you think about it, all the modern things we rely on today for education, like books and writing, computers, videos, all those things are predated by storytelling. Storytelling is the oldest way we have of doing all these things. And so I'm going to talk about storytelling, I think, in the context of learning, especially for children. Storytelling is a way of explaining the things that can't be explained. Science is very, very important. Science has a very important role to play in helping us understand the world. For example, science can tell us how big the sun is. Science can tell us how far the sun is from the earth. Science can even tell us when the sun is going to burn out. But science cannot tell us why the sun is. Why is the sun there? What is the meaning of the sun? How did it come to be? Science cannot explain those things, although it's trying. Science tries to explain these things, but they fall short because, as I was taught by my teachers, we have different ways of learning. We have a learning for here. That's reading, writing, arithmetic, computers, history, science. That's for the brain. That way of looking at the world is very important. We need to have that to understand how to live in that world. But there's another kind of learning, and that is for here, the Native people say, for your heart, for your spirit. That explains the meaning of things. That, again, why is the sun there? Why is there life on earth? Why do people die? All these big questions we ask, science can't explain, and so we have stories to explain those things. But again, they teach us, they assure us in here that everything has a meaning. Everything is in an order that's been established that the stories explain. And so again, storytelling is a way to reach us here that hopefully works in concert with our linear, logical, cognitive mind that sees the world in one way, but our heart sees it in another way. And we need them working together to really understand how this world operates, how it functions, and how we're supposed to live in that world. And so oftentimes the stories will allow us to see things in a light that allows us to make our own sense of them, so that we have the idea of a moral order of the universe, I guess you might say, that the world operates in a set of principles that storytelling allows us to see. Storytelling then is not just for Native Americans. It's not just something that Native American people do. When you think about it, all human beings are storytelling cultures. All stories that every culture tells are a way for us to understand that culture, for ways to understand how they see the world, and through their stories understand how you're supposed to live in that world. And so storytelling, again, allows us to cross that cultural divide and find some common ground. There are stories that exist all around the world that are almost told exactly in the same way, because that story goes around the world, because the questions that cultures ask need the same answers. Storytelling exists before all the modern things that we have. The modern things we have, like reading and writing and video and cell phones and all these things, are very important technological developments. They allow us to live in this world in a more convenient, easier way, but they're not necessarily improvements on storytelling. One of the powers of storytelling, it allows the listener to make their own judgments, their own determinations, their own discoveries, their own learnings by hearing that story. Storytelling is told in such a way that the listener is invited to ask, what did that story mean? What did you learn from this story? Modern education has the idea that we all need to know the same thing. At the end of the lesson, everyone will know the same thing. That's why we have tests, that's why we have quizzes, that's why we have homework, to ensure we all know the same thing. And that's powerful, that's important at its own, within a certain context. But for Native culture, the idea that each listener divines or finds their own answer, their own meaning, their own teaching from the story is equally powerful. that each person needs to be able to look at the world and define it for themselves within their culture, and then also find a way to live in that world according to the teachings of their people and their culture. So storytelling has an open-endedness to it, I guess you would say, that allows the listener a part in the teachings of that story, in finding the teachings for themselves and sharing the teachings through that story on their own. So the stories we share in this curriculum are looking at concepts that we look at from different perspectives and allow us to maybe examine it in terms of the light of science and the light of storytelling and culture. And hopefully, again, those things work together in concert, that you can have science and cultural, deep cultural teachings working together. I was taught that storytelling and science are essentially the same activity. There are different points in a continuum of trying to find out, again, those big issues that confront human beings. How does the world work? How did the world come to be? How do we live in that world? And so they're not at odds with each other at all. They're really meant to complement each other, to work with each other. Neither one can live alone. Neither one can operate independent. And so we need the two things together, especially for Native children. As we look at the struggles of Native children in the public school system, I really believe we need to look at the idea of giving them a cultural context to place all the academic work that they're asked to do, all the things they're asked to learn in the public school system. They're asked to learn this out of the context of their culture. So Native American children need a cultural context for all the academic things that they're asked to learn. That cultural context allows them to make sense of it through the teachings of their own people. Science and culture do not need to be in opposition to each other. They need to find a way to work in concert. As you share these stories, listen to these stories, you can look for certain things that definitely have a relevance to scientific inquiry and study, things that explain natural phenomenon, how the world works, how things operate. So that's one level of looking at these stories, that you can certainly find that. But also, I think within that you might find some moral teachings, some values that are taught, some ways of living in the world with other people and with all living things that hopefully complement that balance that idea of just seeing a phenomenon and describing it, but also giving meaning to that phenomenon. And so things like the wind, things like rain, things like the plants, things like the animals that are all mentioned in these things. At one level, you can just look at them as through the scientific lens and see them as forces or phenomenon in nature. But if you look at them through the story, you also see they have a meaning in the world. There's a purpose that they're here for, and the stories explain that. In concert, those things work together, and they give a fuller picture of the meaning of things in the world. So hopefully looking at these stories, you'll be able to make those linkages yourself as to how this might apply to science and how it also might give a cultural context and meaning to the children who hear these things. So I want to thank you. This gesture means thank you. The people around here, thank you for allowing me to share these thoughts with you as we use storytelling to reach the hearts of children and combine it with the, I guess we'd call it the brain work, the mind work that school asks of them. Then we have I guess, a whole picture then, that we allow the children to understand these things in the way that they best learn. So again, thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the stories.